Hi, guys. Welcome back to Set the Standard podcast, the Selden Standard. It's your girl, Genelle, and I'm coming at you with another solo podcast. I kind of like doing these quick solo podcasts because I feel like I get inspired, I take my notes, and then I'm like, I need to get it out into the world. So if you guys like this style and just like a quick 15 to 20 minute podcast, let me know. I'll keep them coming as I keep getting inspired. I'm going to get right into it because this is a short and sweet podcast, okay? We're keeping it quick. We're going to talk about boundaries today and why they are so important, ridiculously important for you and for others, and also for the world. So I'll start with my first point I wrote down. Boundaries aren't just rules, they're declarations of self-respect. So you are declaring what you need, how you need it clearly, and that gives you a level of self-respect for yourself because your boundary is almost like your limit. It's also saying I love myself enough to demand what I deserve. Also, boundaries aren't to shut anyone out, but they're gates to protect what is valuable, your peace, your worth, and your energy. Boundaries say, if you want access to me, it has to be on terms that honor who I am. You know, I was watching a bunch of YouTube videos today that were super inspiring. So I'm taking notes, I'm writing out my thoughts, I'm looking at other thoughts. And when you have certain boundaries and gates up to protect yourself, it only allows certain people who want to meet you where you are to get through your gate and be in your presence. And that gives you so much self-worth and value when you do that. And when you also prove to yourself and other people that, no, this is my boundary, and then you exercise that and you put it into play, you feel so much more confident. Boundaries also mean that you're not afraid to take a step back and prioritize yourself. And it means prioritizing yourself even if it means you have to walk away from something that was close to your heart. This hits because if I really, really love someone, a friend, a relationship, someone in my family, I have stretched my boundaries for them. Now, I don't stretch my boundaries at all when it comes to new friends, dating, things like that. I'm pretty set in stone. I'm pretty good with it. I've really practiced that, I guess, discipline and or just self-worth in myself and self-respect. But I think where I lose myself is with people I love, which makes sense, right? Because you want to give people you love the benefit of the doubt. You want to, stretch your boundary a little bit just to see if that way when you can pull it back, they can meet you there, even though you're stretching the boundary. You know what I mean? Self-assurance is rare and unforgettable. Boundaries, I love this. And I wrote this. Boundaries aren't just a reflection of love for yourself, but love for the other person. It's saying, I care enough to expect the best out of you, but I also care enough for myself to not settle for less. Boundaries give you that reflection of love, and that type of love is strong, intentional, and transformative. When you implement boundaries for yourself, not only are you raising your self-respect and being like, wow, I allowed myself to stand in this boundary, but you're showing someone that you love them enough to hold them to that boundary, saying like, hey, you know what? I'm going to clearly communicate this boundary to you. If you want to meet it, which I am wanting that for you, because hopefully your boundaries are high. And if people love you, they'll meet you there. They'll do whatever they can to meet your boundaries and to set that. And if they disrespect that, depending on your boundary, you can have a talk with them and communicate and be clear again about what your boundaries really are. But remember, setting boundaries isn't about the other person. It's about you. It's about fulfilling your self-worth, your self-respect, what you're willing to put up with. And let me tell you something. When you set boundaries that you have inherited probably over experiences where your boundaries weren't as strong. Let's just say that. Or maybe you were raised and you grew up and then you had really strong boundaries right out of the gate. But I know most of the time, Boundaries are created when people have crossed limits, and then you're like, oh, there's my limit. I'm no longer going to accept this behavior from friends, family, relationships, partners, lovers, whatever the case is. So then when you set that, it's about you. Setting a boundary is about you because you're just raising that love for yourself. You're proving yourself right. And here's another cool thing about boundaries. And when I get to exercise my boundaries, I feel obviously accomplished. Like, okay, I feel good. I feel safe here. This boundary is secure to me. Because what's cool about exercising boundaries is you can validate yourself by feeling safe and say to yourself, you know what? That was hard, but I feel safe here with this decision. So this boundary works for me. There are other times too where you set a boundary and you're like, I'm feeling uneasy. How do I adjust this? So next time when this situation comes up, I know exactly how to exercise the boundary that I'm going to raise, and then I can feel safe. I can feel secure in myself. I can trust myself. I think at times when I've set boundaries, but then the person that I love messes up or something happens, and right, like humans are not perfect. We are extremely imperfect. We make mistakes. Even when we love somebody, when I set boundaries when I was young, I also loved people. I fell in love very early in life. I was like 14 or 15. I had love for my family members, but my family members were very much imperfect. And at 14 years old, a 14 and 15-year-old boy, very much imperfect. Honestly, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, like people are imperfect. But I set boundaries, right? Like I had limits, but then I noticed I would flex my boundaries for those people I loved. And I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong here, but what I'm saying is what happened when I started really flexing my boundaries, like giant amounts, and then never reverting back to them with the same people, I kind of just stretched the boundary and then kept it there and maybe stretched a little more until like everything was chaotic. I was starting to not trust myself. My self-worth was going down. My self-respect was going down because I was allowing people to stretch my boundaries and I still wasn't getting the outcome that I needed. See, that's another thing too. When you set boundaries, people that love you and want to meet those boundaries will meet you there. But what happens if you start moving your boundaries around for somebody that you love, human nature, they'll keep testing it. They'll be like, oh, she said she was here, but maybe she lowered it a little bit for me. So you know what? I'll meet her there, but then I'm having a bad day. I'll hit lower and I know she'll be forgiving, right? So what happened is when I was young, I was flexing my boundaries for people that I loved, and I started to not trust myself. I started to doubt my gut. I started to feel like my self-worth was going down because then I was like, why won't they meet me at this boundary that I already lowered? Am I not enough? So what was happening is I was lowering my boundaries, so my self-respect, my self-worth, my trust in my gut lowered at a very, 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 very young age in a lot of intense dynamics. Normally, falling in love, I would say it doesn't happen that early. I could be wrong, but I think, all through high school and college, I was lowering boundaries and pushing and then it made me test, okay, I'm going to test this person to see if I can push their boundaries. Let's see how far I can push it and then, see if they love me enough. So then I was also pushing people to the very edge of their boundaries to prove if they loved me enough to maybe flex it how I was doing for other people. So it's a crazy, quote, toxic spiral out of control. Stand firm in your values, trust the process, and know what's meant for you will always find its way back to you. What happens a lot of the time is we fear losing someone or something, an opportunity maybe. And here's the thing. If you trust in God, we talk about God a lot on this podcast because God is number one here in our lives on Set the Standard. If you have faith in God and you trust God, you trust that whatever you are getting put in front of you or whoever is in your life or things brought into you is a gift from God. If you're following God, you're working with God and yourself and you're praying, everything comes from God. Nothing is owned by you. So a lot of the times we flex our boundaries because we don't want to lose someone if we keep our boundaries firm and intense. So we flex them because we either love the person or we don't want to lose that opportunity in person. But if you trust God, you keep your boundaries high and you trust that if God wants this person in your life as your partner, as your future boyfriend, husband, best friend, whatever family member, he will show you. And you have to trust him because he has the best interest for you and your life. And sometimes it hurts. It really hurts. But set the boundary. Don't waver the boundary and trust in God. And people, I promise, people that love you will meet you where you want them to meet you. I promise. And sometimes people can love you and not be able to meet your boundary because of their emotional maturity or where they're at in life. And that's another thing too we need to accept as people. I've also accepted that addiction, narcissism, emotional immaturity also doesn't mean someone may not love me, but they just can't meet me where I need to be met. And some of you might argue, well, if someone really truly loves you, they'll give up their addiction, they'll get help, they'll do whatever they can. And a part of me believes that. I think with addiction and narcissism, like those really big mental health issues, it's a little bit tougher to say. I've dealt with both actually. And some moments I'm like, wow, does this person love me? Their actions don't show me that they love me, right? Even if they're a family member, my blood. But then another part of me is like, they're their own worst enemy to themselves as well. They don't love themselves either. So that's my thought process with that. Set your boundaries, hold firm in them. I recently got this new Bible app. It's called Bible Chat. You can type in any question you're wondering and it'll pull up an explanation and then it'll pull up verses from the Bible that can help you understand the question. I wrote, what does God say about setting boundaries in a relationship? It says the concept of setting boundaries in relationships is not directly addressed in the Bible in modern terms, but the principles of healthy relationships and respect are a consistent theme throughout Scripture. So it says Ephesians 4:15 encourages us to interact with others by speaking the truth in love, which suggests the importance of honest and loving communication. Setting boundaries often requires clear and compassionate communication to maintain respect and understanding. By embracing these principles, guarding your heart, and speaking truth in love, you can create a healthy foundation for relationships that honor God and each person's dignity. I reflected on this and I thought to myself, this is why I titled this podcast the way I did, Boundaries, and why they're the greatest form of love. It allows people to reflect on themselves. It allows you to build love for yourself or adjust your boundaries greater. And it allows you to then, because, if you have strong boundaries and you're constantly fearing you're going to lose people or be alone because your boundaries are so strong, it's then trusting in God that you have to lean on. You have nothing really else to lean on if your boundaries are strong and you're like, no, I require this. I need this. And that's that. And then if you don't have God in your life, yes, you'll be worried. You'll be fearful of loss. And the last thing that you need to completely get out of your head is being fearful at all and to be fearless. I talked about this in How to Be a Woman of God. Being a woman of God is being fearless, but fearing God. So when you start flexing your boundaries and you're moving them around for that person, you should fear God because you should realize you're only going to hurt yourself and your self-worth. And when you start flexing boundaries for people, you're not trusting in God. You're telling God, I don't trust you. I need to move around my own self-worth and self-respect and boundaries to keep this person around because I'm so scared of losing them. I'm so scared of letting them down. I love them, so this is how I show I love them. No, this is not how you show someone you love them, by flexing your boundaries. You stick your boundaries into place and it may hurt them, but And it may hurt you too. It's hard, especially with people that you love. Over time, you respect yourself. And in this life, you have to love yourself first before you love anybody else. That's been said. It's so cliche. It's said a million times over, but it's so true. So if you do not have self-love first, you cannot love anyone. How do we build self-love, self-worth, self-respect? Through boundaries. Let's say you're like, I don't even really have boundaries for new people I meet. Start writing down things that exhaust you, maybe on a social night out. Maybe if you drink too much, set a boundary for yourself. Hey, when I go out and do social stuff and I don't really know a lot of people at that party, and maybe I say things I don't like, I'm going to limit myself to one drink. And that's a boundary you set for yourself. And then test yourself next time you go out. Setting boundaries isn't for others. It's for yourself too. And so test yourself. Okay, I had one drink and I still had a great time. And then you go to bed and you feel so accomplished. You feel so much self-love, respect. You wake up the next day and you've accomplished that boundary. You feel so good and you're like, this boundary is going to work for me. Now, where we get in trouble is when we're like, okay, let's see if we can have 2 drinks and be like social. I've done this. You go and do it. You still have fun. Maybe you even had a little bit more fun because you were a little bit more loose. So you're like, aha, I got this. So then you're out one night and you're really having fun and you just are drinking wine, beer, liquor, shots, all of it all around, and you lose yourself and you end up saying something or doing something. The shame, right? The shame, the disappointment. Your self-respect and worth goes down. I have been there. Like my heart aches thinking about this because I wasn't strong in certain boundaries. I hope you took away something from this short and sweet episode. I love doing these episodes. I get so inspired. It's like my little pep talk. I hope you guys find some inspiration, and leave a comment down below if you like these. And I hope you found some inspiration to set boundaries for yourself, for people around you, and for people you love. You have to do it for all people. And what's cool about setting boundaries is you kind of log it in your head. And it's once you kind of make a boundary, you'll notice it's always kind of there. So I've set a boundary. I've been setting boundaries more than I ever have in my life in the past 2 weeks. And I hear it. I hear it loud and clear. It runs across my head. If I get tempted to drink more, if I get tempted to communicate with someone that, showed that they couldn't show up for me or whatever it is, that boundary, it runs right across I don't have to be like, what was that boundary? I know exactly what boundary I set for that specific situation that I have learned from, because we build boundaries off of experiences, and hopefully we're guided by our parents to set boundaries as kids and to stand up for ourselves. But sometimes that isn't always the case. I really believe my core boundaries came from later advice from my dad, and then from his experiences and hearing other people's experiences, because I'm like, whoa, I don't want to go there. I've never tried drugs before, and I've seen people have a really great time and I've seen people have a not so great time. You hear crazy stories. For me, that made their experiences and those stories and those things made me set that boundary. I didn't have to experience it to set a boundary of, hey, Genelle, you're never going to try drugs. It's fine. And that's the boundary that I set. If anyone offers, pushes, nope, no, thank you. No, I'm okay. No, I'm good. Why not? I'm okay. Thank you so much. Walk away. You know what it is? So boundaries are created through experience, but also doing your own research, loving yourself. And I promise your self-love and self-respect will skyrocket. You will excel and be amazing. So thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I was literally going to close out a few minutes ago, but here we are still rambling. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate you guys so much. And I'll see you in the next podcast. Bye.